This past spring, thousands of music lovers flocked to the streets of downtown Durham, North Carolina. They roamed several city blocks in search of a good string band. And they had plenty to choose from. This could have been just about any folk music festival in the country. But one major thing set it apart. Nearly every performer was Black.
It was the largest Black roots music festival that's happened in the United States to date.
And it was all the brainchild of one person, the world-renowned musician Rhiannon Giddens.
It's just community. It's my community, basically. And I was like, other people do this, why can't I?
Rhiannon has won Grammys and written books, ballets, and even a Pulitzer Prize-winning opera. And a through line across all of that includes the reclaiming of lost Black folk music traditions.
This aspect of what we're doing in our culture, I don't feel like is celebrated enough. This idea of rescuing cultural things like old-time music.
But her work and this festival are just a small part of a much bigger movement. I'm Anissa Khalifa. This is The Broadside, where we tell stories from our home at the crossroads of the South. This week, we tell the story of how a group of young musicians from North Carolina sparked a Black folk revival, and why it matters who gets to play the banjo in America.
Audible's romance collection has something to satisfy every side of you. When it comes to what kind of romance you're into, you don't have to choose just one. Fancy a dalliance with a duke, or maybe a steamy billionaire. You could find a book boyfriend in the city and another one tearing it up on the hockey field. And if nothing on this earth satisfies, you can always find love in another realm. Discover modern rom-coms from authors like Lily Chu and Allie Hazelwood, the latest romantasy series from Sarah J. Maas and Rebecca Yarros, plus Regency favorites like Bridgerton and Outlander. And of course, all the really steamy stuff. Your first great love story is free when you sign up for a free 30-day trial at audible.com/Wondery. That's audible.com/Wondery.
Basketball game? Crushed it. And the day's just getting started. Now, kicking it with my crew. When I need a quick snack, Go-Go Squeeze Active Fruit Blend with electrolytes pouches are always in the starting lineup. Made with real fruit and select electrolytes. And so tasty. From workouts to hangouts to whatever's next, I go with Go-Go Squeeze Active. Snag yours on your next store run. Available on Amazon.
My name is Julie Hight. I live in Nashville, Tennessee. I have been a music critic, music writer, music journalist for 20 years plus, and I'm currently senior music writer for Nashville Public Radio.
Julie spends most of her time in the Music City, but recently she visited my neck of the woods, Durham, North Carolina, which became a music city of its own for a weekend in April, when Durham hosted the Biscuits and Banjos Music Festival.
I mean, bands and solo performers, outdoor stages, indoor stages, large performing arts centers and rock clubs.
The Black Roots Music Festival featured musicians from across the U.S., and even some from Canada.
And lots of different styles of banjo playing.
Julie says this event was a culmination of something special. For well over a decade, she's been reporting on a growing revival of Black fiddle and banjo music. Along the way, she's interviewed key figures like Rhiannon Giddens, the artistic director for Biscuits and Banjos.
For this festival, she pulled together multiple generations of Black roots performers, visionaries, pioneers, new waves of artists who've come along since. And for the big headlining slot, she reunited her old band, the Carolina Chocolate Drops. They are the Black string band that really kicked off this movement 20 years ago. But
what tradition is Rhiannon helping to revive? And why do black banjo players and fiddlers often feel like traditional music scenes aren't made for them? It has a lot to do with the deeply complicated history of the banjo itself. The instrument, widely associated with white folk and Appalachian music, isn't from the British Isles or mainland Europe. It's African.
There are a lot of different instruments that have different names than the banjo that originated in different parts of Africa that are looked at as predecessors that were brought over by enslaved people, and they were playing them and, refining them. But originally, really, people saw it as a black instrument.
But as early as the 1830s, white musicians began to use the banjo to mock black people.
A way that they did that was through blackface, minstrelsy. I mean, because they were not only saying, I want to play this repertoire of music, I want to play this instrument. They were actually creating really ugly, stylized stereotypes of Black Southern dialect and visual presentation and that kind of thing. I mean, it was a pivotal moment in American entertainment, really. It is wild to think about what a mainstream thing that was.
And unsurprisingly, this was also the moment where black musicians began to turn away from the banjo, an instrument they invented. But Julie says another major development helped seal the deal: the creation of the commercial recording industry and its ways of categorizing music.
All the wood piled down, sung and played on the banjo by Charles A. Asbury of New York City.
I think it's really important to think about this stuff because we take for granted that genre categories are these naturally existing categories, and they are not. There are reasons why things are categorized the way that they are, and there are, human fingerprints on those things. The people who were doing that early recording and choosing the performers to record and choosing what they wanted them to record, they were imposing racially coded categories onto the music. And then those records were marketed under demographically specific categories. Race records were for black record buyers and hillbilly records were for white record buyers.
They literally called them race records. So in this new world, if you were a white blues musician or a black banjo player, you didn't fit into the industry's predetermined boxes. And while Julie says there were exceptions to the rules, artists like that rarely got chances to be recorded.
And it erased entire histories and lineages that weren't recorded. So all of that was lost. So it's a lot of different things at once that has built and built and built over time.
By the middle of the 20th century, the banjo wasn't seen as a black instrument anymore, and everything got set in stone.
So much so that a few generations later, someone like Dom Flemons, who eventually co-founded the Carolina Chocolate Drops and became one of the most knowledgeable and respected performers on the folk circuit, he had to seek out the history on his own. It was not handed down to him.
So when you think of it that way, that's just sort of the trajectory that was placed out there. So like my parents, they were deep soul music fans, and they wouldn't have known anything about like fiddle and banjo music.
Dom's experience isn't unique. Brandy Waller-Pace, another roots musician and educator I spoke with, had a similar story.
I saw a lot of that music as not something I was completely disconnected from, but not something that came from my culture just because I was so ignorant about that contribution.
But there was a brief moment where all of this could have changed. Around the 1950s, folk music saw a huge revival. And all of a sudden, the banjo was back on big stages, from Newport, Rhode Island to Monterey, California.
It was a phenomenon where traditional performers and people who had kind of been lost to memory really, really returned to prominence. And then they inspired a lot of younger musicians to kind of take up the music.
I ring it in the morning. I ring it in the evening. All over this line.
So, I mean, my understanding is that movement in the 50s didn't really seem to impact young Black artists significantly. Is that right? Why is that?
I mean, there were elder Black musicians who were rediscovered during the folk revival, and there were young Black performers who were part of that scene. But just like in the earlier periods we talked about, they tended to get pigeonholed as blues performers, so that further reinforced the notion of folk music as white music. Narrative's a powerful thing, you know?
Black musicians and audiences would have to wait 50 more years for their own folk revival, one led by a dynamic trio from the Piedmont region of North Carolina.
Cornbread and butter beans, and you across the table, eating them beans and making love as long as I am able.
That's coming up after a short break. Hi, it's Anissa, with a special announcement and a small request. The Broadside is coming up on our 100th episode. And to mark the occasion, we're going to do something a little different. A mailbag special. Do you have a question about North Carolina that you just haven't been able to find the answer to? Is there some offbeat local lore you'd love to know the backstory for? Send us your question in email or voice note form to broadside@WUNC.org, and we'll answer it on the show.
This is your before and after story. Instead of imagining a rewarding career in medical imaging, Southeastern College can actually take you there. Prepare for a career in ultrasound, radiology, and X-ray technology. With hands-on specialized training, simulations, and real-life experience with the latest imaging technology, you'll be ready to play a vital role on any healthcare team. Transform your life by helping others. Southeastern College. Your future is bright. Visit scc.edu to get started.
At Radiolab, we love nothing more than nerding out about science, neuroscience, chemistry.
But we do also like to get into other kinds of stories. Stories about policing or
politics,
country music,
hockey,
sex, of bugs.
Regardless of whether we're looking at science or not science, we bring a rigorous curiosity to get you the answers.
And hopefully make you see the world anew.
Radiolab, adventures on the edge of what we think we know.
Wherever you get your podcasts.
As a kid growing up in Phoenix, Arizona, Dom Flemons became mesmerized by old styles of music, especially anything to do with the banjo. But once he started to play music himself, Dom realized his options were pretty limited.
The internet existed, but it wasn't what it is now. So to meet someone else that was into that type of music, it was few and far between. Like in Phoenix, there was a folk festival, and so I used to jam with the people there, but that was a lot of folks that were sort of middle-aged or older.
I think what's most fun is to picture him as the one young musician.
Again, this is music writer Julie Hight.
In a folk scene that was all, other than him, people a generation or two older, and he was in the mix. He was busking, playing coffee houses, that kind of thing. So he was the young guy, the young kid, and one of the only Black musicians.
But then, about 20 years ago, something happened that would change that and alter the course of Dom's life forever. A fellow Black musician from Arizona, Zule Greg Wilson, told him about an event happening across the country in Boone, North Carolina. It was called the Black Banjo Gathering.
It was kind of an academic conference and kind of a gathering of musicians to jam and have a mini festival at Appalachian State. And so he was so interested in this thing that he made the trip.
There, Dom met other banjo obsessives from all over the country. And for one of the first times in his life, he didn't have to work to reconstruct the history of Black folk music on his own.
And that's why it was sort of this big bang, it wasn't so much that there hadn't been other events talking about the banjo, but because so many different factions of the banjo's history were brought together, and that the mission was to elevate the African, Caribbean, and African American roots of the banjo. That was the thing that made it such an important event.
But maybe even more importantly, Dom made connections with other young Black musicians. And soon after the gathering, he began playing with two North Carolina-based old-time musicians, Justin Robinson and Rhiannon Giddens. Beyond their shared love of string band music, they were all processing the same fact.
Learning the banjo as a Black instrument, it just felt like a slap in the face.
This is Rhiannon, chatting with Julie Hight again.
On the one hand, it's very exciting. It's like, oh, wow, this history is much more interesting than I thought. I actually can have this or whatever. But it was also like, why don't I know this? The why the history has been taught that way became really big for me. In whose best interest is it that I don't know this? We're all three of us nerds, all three of us grappling with what it meant to be who we were. So as Dom and I and Justin started going out, we just quickly realized that we were going to have to figure out something or we were going to go crazy.
That something would eventually turn into the band Carolina Chocolate Drops. And as the trio began digging deeper into the music, they discovered a rich history of Black fiddle and banjo music in the Piedmont region surrounding Durham, North Carolina. Distinct from Appalachian music, and at times decidedly Black, it felt like the missing link they'd all been searching for.
I understood it enough to say, I'm leaving Arizona. I sold everything I owned, jumped in my car and jumped on I-40 and came right out.
What's so special about North Carolina?
Well, I think for those musicians, what was so special was that they found the most incredible opening that they could possibly find to this tradition that they were learning about in abstract ways, Black string band music and Black banjo playing. They found Joe Thompson.
You know how old I am?
How old are you?
91.
Oh, my Lord. How do you feel?
I'm slowing down.
Joe Thompson is one of the last of the old-time string band fiddle players.
I happen to be one of the last ones. So many of them done deceased and gone on in.
He means gone on in to heaven.
On my way to heaven, I shall not be moved.
He was still living and still performing and had this repertoire to teach them. He was the embodiment of that music, living and breathing and willing to let them come over to his house.
And so then we started going down to Joe Thompson's house every Thursday, and we spent about a year and a half where we were going every Thursday, and we became his backup band. And when Joe would go away and we would go jam off on our own, then we started to develop a sound of our own.
Really, from the very beginning, people would get just drawn in and really excited by what they were doing because they were young, they were exciting, they were relatable. It was someone who was, people who were close to our age that were out there doing it. But when I think about them as a young band, I think about how all young bands, they're expected to introduce themselves and say, here's who we are, here's why you should pay attention to us. But not only did they have to do that, they also had to explain where they belonged and what lineage they were part of, because people were constantly asking them, what is this idea of a Black string band? What is this idea of Black banjo playing? It wasn't something that was widely known.
Because it is such heavy history. It is such a deep cultural rift and divide that was being healed. It had to be treated with meticulous care.
And we quickly realized we need to take control of these interviews. We need to make sure we know what we're talking about. So, it just came out of really wanting to represent Joe and the music and the history, and also knowing that we were the representatives. And that really was kind of the key, I think.
In the early 2010s, the Chocolate Drops garnered more and more acclaim. Their album Genuine Negro Jig became a hit and won them a Grammy in 2011. It fused traditional string band music with the group's signature twist on modern styles.
While he was scheming, I was beaming in his beamer, just beaming. Can't believe that I caught my man cheating, so I found another way to make him pay for it all.
They brought the black string band tradition back to life in such a living, breathing, riveting way, and right behind them, so many other black musicians got to see them perform, got to listen to their recordings, and were either encouraged, to go further down the path or to start down the path in the first place.
I felt very self-conscious about playing it, but I knew that I just loved the sound of it. It was very calming to me. It felt like a place of respite.
This is Kaya Cater. She's a Juno Award-winning musician and a member of the black string band New Dangerfield. Kaya was 10 or 11 when she first saw the Carolina Chocolate Drops. For her, it was a life-changing event.
And so I went into this ballroom, and that was the first time I'd ever seen another black person playing the banjo, ever. And, I was a musical kid. I'd been to tons of folk festivals, tons of bluegrass festivals. I mean, I'd seen a lot of live music, more than many kids my age. But that was the first time that I saw black people playing the banjo. And it felt like I was catching up in a way to history that had long been known. It was such a organic thing. It was a lineage passing, But yeah, as a kid, that's what I remember holding on to, was like, oh my God, I have to know more about this right away.
And stories like that represent one of the Chocolate Drops' ultimate accomplishment. While they were out there building their audience, they also became sources of inspiration and even mentors for this new generation of black pickers.
I do remember it was a moment. I was like, oh my God, this is nuts. It's like, I've been listening to you since I was a little kid. And I'm like, oh God. But cool. I didn't get to see young black people doing a hip hop song on fiddles and banjos. I didn't get to see that. We had to be it. But I'm really glad that we played the part that we played. Really just very, very grateful.
That family tree of black folk music has grown considerably. There are now dozens of top-tier black roots musicians out there, and thousands of fans. So many, in fact, that the movement had a homecoming of sorts in April at Biscuits and Banjos in Durham.
It's been a few years, but we're glad to be back.
The festival's headliners were none other than the Carolina Chocolate Drops, playing together once again after more than a decade apart.
No one had had a chance to see them perform together since they went on hiatus a little over a decade ago. So the founders of the group reuniting to mark their 20th anniversary, that was a big deal.
And on the last night of the festival, that reunion finally happened. So what was it like?
It was a multi-generational celebration like no other. Kaya Cater's string band New Dangerfield opened, and the three founding Chocolate Drops, Justin, Dom, and Rhiannon, reminded everyone just how good they are. They pointed us back to their mentor, the great Piedmont fiddler Joe Thompson, and all these other musicians that have been part of the Chocolate Drops over the years shared the stage too, along with a lot of others who have become part of this movement.
it's fulfilled a dream that I had 20 years ago when I came to North Carolina from Arizona. It's more than just a few people here and there. It's now become a full genre and a cohort and a collection of people that is growing.
And it just takes a minute, and it makes you feel old, but like, what a privilege. It is a privilege to be able to be inspired by and then to inspire. It's like you have to be a link in a chain. You have to know where you're coming from, but it really means a lot when you can see people coming behind you, because that means you've done your job, And Joe would be thrilled, I think, to know that there were more people playing his tunes and being inspired by the people who were inspired by him. Like, that's all he wanted, really.
This episode of The Broadside was part of a collaboration with WPLN in Nashville, Tennessee. It was produced by Julie Hight, Jared Walker, and Charlie Shelton Ormond. It was edited by Jared Walker and Charlie Shelton Ormond. Our executive producer is Wilson Sayre. This episode included archival recordings from WRAL in Raleigh, the Southern Folklife Collection at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and the documentary film Dink, a Pre-Blues Musician. The Broadside is a production of WUNC North Carolina Public Radio and is part of the NPR network. If you have feedback or a story idea, you can email us at broadside@wunc.org. If you enjoyed the show, leave us a rating, a review, or share it with a friend. I'm Anissa Khalifa. Thanks for listening, y'all. We'll be back next week.
Summer might be wrapping up, but Pluto TV's Summer of Cinema is still going strong with hundreds of free movies. It's never too late to join an epic adventure with Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. Step up your movie game with Stomp the Yard. Get in the ring with Nacho Libre. Or set a course for the stars with Star Trek. Every Star Trek. Download the Pluto TV app now while the sun still shines on Pluto TV's Summer of Cinema. Stream now, pay never.